At Option Genius, we believe that you deserve freedom, financial freedom, so that you have no more worries and more than enough money. Time freedom, so that you could do what you want, when you want to do it. And choice freedom, to live your life on your terms. But the system and Wall Street are rigged against us little guys. So how do we fight back? Well, my friend, that's what this podcast is all about. My name is Alan Sama, and this is the Option Genius Podcast. All right, passive traders, welcome to another edition of the Option Genius Podcast. Today I'm here with my good friend Justin Boyum, who is a U.S. Army veteran. He's also a very successful businessman, speaker, and a professional and executive coach. Being a veteran himself, he does look out for the other veterans and their families and tries to help them find fulfilling careers, create strong relationships, and live joyful lives. How you doing, Justin?
Doing great, man.
What you been up to lately?
Lately, I have been doing some events, going around talking with other veterans and professionals out there, just trying to learn more about how people are dealing with our new COVID era that we're in and dealing with lockdowns and the different strategies that are available to them to accelerate in their careers or their business.
Awesome. Sweet. So the reason I wanted to bring Justin on is because as a veteran, he goes through and he's been trained in making quick decisions. And as we are traders, we need to have the ability to take limited information and act on that. And, you know, some people I've talked to in the past, they're like, well, I want to know that everything is going to be perfectly exactly the way I need it to before I make a trade. And that's just not how it works. We need to take imperfect information. We have to be okay with not knowing everything and that knowing that we might be wrong on our assessment and still be able to adapt. And so when I was talking to Justin, he was saying the same things. And I was like, man, this is some really good stuff. So when he talks to, you know, his students and his clients, he talks about how to be high performance and how to make those quick decisions and how to make the decisions that will put you in the position that you can excel. So Justin, tell me something about the stuff that you learned in the military. Like, how do you go from, because you were active, right? You were in a war zone.
Right. I was on active duty. I did a tour in Iraq during Iraqi freedom in Basra. And yeah, absolutely. So realistically, to talk about exactly what you mentioned, right, being able to make quick decisions. I mean, one of the first things that they teach their leaders and their officers and, you know, the sergeants is there is the worst decision that you can make is no decision, right? So they teach you to be able to really make decisions, and you got to use the information that you have in front of you. And that doesn't mean that every decision you make is always going to work out perfectly. But the worst thing to do is to be inaction. And I think one of the more beautiful illustrations of this is in the HBO series that they did for Band of Brothers. They showed the Battle of Bastogne, which is a very key battle in World War II. And they had a new lieutenant that was less decisive, that was going to lead this effort initially. And the soldiers already kind of knew that too. And so there was a lot of concern about, like, are we going to be able to handle this? But sure enough, they go into action, and that's when, you know, the combat starts and he completely freezes. And it's causing them to, you know, take on casualties and have all these issues. And they send in, you know, another captain from another unit just to run in there and take over operations. And he quickly figures out, where's everybody at? I've got to make a decision. We get going. And then they go and they actually complete this mission, which was effectively, you can really pinpoint that that's where, you know, the Allied forces really won the war, was winning this particular battle. And it was because somebody came in and he just made decisions, right? And it wasn't always perfect. And he did some crazy things in that battle. Go watch the series if you want to see it, or read the book. It's a fantastic book. But I mean, realistically, the difference was that he went and made decisions when he got into action. And, you know, yeah, there's going to be risks that you have to take, and you have to just do whatever. You have to kind of calculate that in your head quick enough, like what's an acceptable amount of risk, and you got to go. But obviously in a war effort, you've got to make that decision or you're going to lose the war, right? So There's a little bit of a raised stakes there. But I think in general, when I talk with my students, whether they're building a business, following their careers, you know, making more sales for their book of business, whatever it is, they've got to be able to raise that necessity to that kind of warlike effort. Like, if I don't go do this, these are the potential results that, or lack of results, I'm going to see. And there are a number of ways to attach meaning to that. But absolutely, you got to be able to make decisions and go. And the worst thing you can do is do nothing.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's two things that you mentioned there. One of the things is that we find that people are, you know, they want to be successful. They want to make more money trading. They want to live a better life and have a better lifestyle, but they are afraid to get started.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to make that first step and get in because it's like, oh, I don't know this and I don't know how to do this and this is confusing to me. And then there's that other person who's a little bit further down the line and he has put on a trade and he has followed the rules and he's doing everything properly. But then the market, like the market does or the stock, it doesn't cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the person doesn't know what to do and they're flustered and, they're taking losses. It's not the same as in a war zone. We're not dying here. We're not getting hurt. But, when you lose money, it kind of feels the same way.
Well,
and
you think about the ripple effects of that, of course, too, right? Like, what does that mean for your family? What does that mean to the people that you're connected to, right? What does that keep you from being able to invest in, right? Maybe you're the kind of person that likes to invest in charities that like supports things like my community, like the veteran community or what have you, right? Like you not being able to perform at a high level, which is why I love to talk about high performance, because in order to be successful at anything, especially when you're dealing with something that can be volatile like a market, you've got to really be very highly clear and be able to take that bold action, because there's real meaning behind what if I don't go do. Like I look at this as like, say like I was somebody who was in like cold call sales. Mm-hmm. And like anybody who's ever been cold calling, I don't know if you've been in cold calling before, but you got to go and make like 100 calls a day, and maybe 5 of them will pick up, right? Depending on what kind of businesses you're calling or how good you are your outreach. But in general, when people are first starting out, at least you're looking at like a 2 to 5% like success rate of even getting to talk to a human being that doesn't hang up on you.
Right.
And that can be difficult, but we'll break that down to say 20 calls. If you stopped at 19, that 20th call might be the person that said yes. And whatever solution it is, you're selling product solution, right? By not making that next call, you've sacrificed that other person's, joy or their ability to get what they want. And who does that affect, right? The people that are not near them. Right. So it's important that you be able to do those things and be able to overcome that fear of rejection or failure. Like you might get in the market, like, oh, yeah, I had this happen one time and it didn't go well. Right. Well, what if I stopped cold calling after the first person that called me an idiot on the phone and hung up on me because I didn't like the way that made me feel? Well, that kept me from making the next call where I could have served somebody at a very high level and gotten them what they needed to do, which not only helps them, but helps my business, helps my family. Right. And all the different ripple effects that go from there. So.
Okay. So how would you walk somebody through that situation? So I'll try to put it back in the trading scenario. So there's a guy who is in a new environment, doing something new, not too experienced, hasn't been through the ups and downs before, but he has made the jump. He's very scared, but he made the jump. He's done some trades, but now all of a sudden, because like right now, what's going on in the stock market has been going up. For the last several years, it's just been going almost straight up. And now, after COVID, we have some turbulence. We have a big market drop. A lot of people got scared. But then even after that, the market rallied back higher. And now everybody and their brother is wanting to trade and buying stocks and telling, oh, I'm making so much money, which that's great. But all you're doing, you're not doing it properly. You're just jumping in and getting that, you're getting some quick gains because that's just what the market is doing, just going straight up. It's easy to do right now. But when it turns, and I do believe it's going to turn, pretty soon, there's a lot of uncertain activities and events coming up, the election and all that. So let's say somebody has done that. They don't have that much experience. They got in, they placed some trades, they've made some money, they're a little bit maybe overconfident. But now the trade turns around and they're at a point where, okay, I need to make a decision. Either I need to get out of my trade, or I need to buckle down and stay in, or I need to change my trade or adjust it somehow. Can you walk them through, or do you have some steps that they could take or some questions they could ask themselves?
Right. So I think that kind of keys in. So most people, and it's kind of what we've kind of been talking about as we've been going through this, there are kind of 3 major areas that cause most people to fail or quit at their goals. Mm-hmm. And the very first one, I think that we've been kind of talking around now, is fear. Fear is something that really drives a lot of decision makings. And sometimes when we're in a place where we're operating out of a place of fear, we tend to make bad decisions. We tend to make decisions that don't really serve us.
Definitely.
Or you might just go quit, right? Like, hey, I got into this trading because I wanted to make, $10K a month. I don't know what the average person, if they really commit to this, tends to make. But let's say they want to make $10K a month, allows me to quit my job, allows me to really, freelance my time better or manage my time to be able to spend more time with my family or retire or whatever I'm going to do.
Right.
So I would kind of come back to what was that original goal that you had, because fear, like sometimes it's like, it could be like, hey, I'm concerned about what the outcome may be. Maybe it's not what I'm going to want, right? Maybe I go invest this money in trading and I actually end up losing money. Maybe it's going to be harder than I expect. Maybe they're a little bit afraid of process that's going to be a little hard. Or maybe they've got some stories in their background films like, well, I've always kind of failed at some of these things, or I had a bad experience before, so I'm not going to go and do this again. Even if they've learned a strategy from someone like you that says, yeah, this can be successful if you do it right. So how do you overcome that fear? And I think that you'd have to really go back and attach that, have the clarity around of why you're doing what you're doing. Now, certainly you want to follow a great strategy and you want to have a really good, effective plan. Mm-hmm. But just like in the military, right? Like, I mean, sometimes we can have excellent plans and we've got the greatest military in the world because they've done a lot of the research and they make sure that they look at what's acceptable risk to them and like what we need to do to be okay with something. But even with that, like if you read any military book, like stuff like hits the fan, right? And you got to be able to deal with that and be able to make decisions and move forward. Sometimes you're going to take some losses along the way, and sometimes it can really work out great for you. And so what I would go back and look at somebody, so in this case of if I was going to work with somebody who's a trader and go like, yeah, I really wanted to make this 10K a month, but I'm really afraid of making this decision because the market's volatile. And I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to get out of this. And I said, okay, well, why don't you write me a check for $10,000? Okay. Because by not making the decisions and staying with your commitment, that's what you're doing. You just go ahead and write me that check for this month. You go tell your family that you wrote a check for $10,000 because you don't want to play. Right?
Right. Yeah. Because you're leaving it on the table. It's the same as not having it.
And I wasn't working with a trader, but I had that with somebody who was a sales representative. He was a real estate guy, and he's like, hey, I wanted to be able to sell this much real estate so I could make this amount of income. And he was thinking, it's like, man, this is really hard. It's very competitive. Like, I live in a major metro, so I can throw a rock and hit another real estate agent right now. And he's like, man, I think maybe I need to go another direction. But the problem is that fear was going to follow him to whatever other opportunity he was going to go to. So it's about whether or not did he really want to commit to this. He got into real estate because he liked able to help people, find that solution, that dream home and that lifestyle, and obviously allows him to do his lifestyle, manage the time that he wants to.
Right.
But by saying, I'm not sure about this, or I'm not going to make that decision, or I might just get out of this altogether, I was like, well, you said you want to make 10K a month. Just go ahead and write me that check and go home and tell your wife that's what you did today. Because that's what you're doing. And I've been there too. I've been in a place where I was in a sales role or I was trying to start my business and that's my goals. And by not taking action, I might as well have just said, that's what I need to just give up today.
Yeah.
And that keeps me from being able to go to donate to the charities that I think are important, be able to take my kids on the vacations that they deserve, send them to private school if I so choose or whatever, right? And that's the ripple effect of not making decisions, right? Sometimes you might step on it and it might not work out like you want, but all that's going to end up happening by getting out is that you have regrets. How that could have worked out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to be smart about it, right? Hey, look at the market and look at the information that you have available to you and try to make the best decisions you have. But there's no guarantees, certainly not in trading, just as much as there's no guarantees that my business is going to just do anything, right? I got to go perform at a level and do the things that are important, but actually go out there and do it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest part. But the thing is that, we teach all our people to do it in a way where you're putting the odds in your favor. So you're lining it up so you have as much success built in before you get started. But there's always that fear there. There's always that thing. So I guess what that means is you bring it back to what the goal is, what the why is, right? Yeah. So that overcomes that initial fear.
I would agree with you about give yourself the best odds. They do that in the military. Yeah. In basic training, they talk about squad tactics, right? They don't let you go and set schedule like an operation unless we have 3-to-1 odds in personnel, right? Like if you've got a 10-person unit and there's another 10-person unit that you're going to go and ambush, that's not good odds. They're like, we're not taking that risk. Right. So you can establish your boundaries of what's good for you.
Right. What's acceptable
within that system. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if you said, hey, I set this goal. Okay. Well, then you need to adjust what kinds of trades am I going to make?
Right.
Right. So I talk to a real estate agent. I'll go, okay, well, you got to sell this much inventory. Well, what if you just instead worked in a higher level of real estate and then you don't have to make as many sales? Mm-hmm. Right. Or, hey, that's a complicated market. Okay, well, maybe you can go into an that you sell more inventory, right? But you have to sell more to reach that same goal. There's different ways to do whichever one, but you've got to figure out what's your framework that you're going to work within. And these are my boundaries. I think in the military, we call that the left and right limits, right? Okay, anything in this field of vision is what I'm responsible for. Anything outside of that, I don't go past that.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. I like that. The left and right limits.
Yeah.
So I'm going to focus on whatever's in front of me. So one of the things we have people do is we do a personality test and a risk assessment. Mm-hmm. So it's how much risk am I good with, Am I a risk taker, like a real gambler, or am I just like, hey, I'm super conservative. If I lose $1, I'm going to have a heart attack kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so based on that, then they decide what strategies we want and we work with them. But so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so but now let's say we're in the midst of the battle. Mm-hmm. And things are not going exactly as we plan. Like you said, the stuff is hitting the fan. Now, how do I make the decisions or what do I do to make the proper decision to help myself?
I think ultimately, again, you're going to have to look at the parameters with your framework, right? So I look at this as, I love to use this analogy all the time. Have you ever seen the movie Moneyball?
Yeah.
It's a baseball movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about basically the order to win a baseball game was I don't need to go get all this flashy stuff. I just need to make sure that I score more than the other team. And the best way to do that is to make sure that my guys are getting on base. Mm-hmm. Right. And so basically what you're looking at is just more turns on base or more at bats, right? Or however you want to look at that. And so I always just talk to my people if they're looking to build a business, right? So MLM, trading, whatever you have to get on base, right? And give yourself the ultimate opportunity to do that and win. So you might have to look at and look, there's military operations where they have withdrawn. Okay. And there's been major motion pictures about it. Like We Were Soldiers, right? That was a battle that did not go well. Right. And they had to figure out how they're going to get out of that and move on or go do the next thing. And sometimes you have to make that assessment where this particular opportunity isn't working out. We need to cut losses and you need to be comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. What that means, hey, okay, I might be taking a loss here, but what you don't do is you let that stop you from getting back in the game. Hey, I got to go to this next at bat.
Right.
I'm sure anybody who's in I keep going back to real estate because it's an easy analogy because it's about investing and stuff. But hey, I'm sure not every investment worked out.
Yep.
Right. So sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't go. You can do the best you can to give yourself the best opportunity to make money.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when you're making those trades, you just, again, more at bats. The more you do within your framework, whatever kinds of stocks that you use, you can do the backwards math on that and what's it going to take to win. Right. The Oakland A's and the baseball analogy, they didn't win every game. They just give themselves the best chance to win every time.
And for those of you guys who are listening and have read the book, I did not talk to Justin beforehand. Because Justin, I talk about that as one of the pillars, the Moneyball, getting on base. Because a lot of times, well, what we do is what we teach is, making very small conservative bets, but just winning over and over again. So our trading strategy wins about 80%, 90% of the time. So we're not hitting home runs. We're not trying to double, triple our money every time, but we're putting on small bets. So we're making 10%, 10%, 10% in an easy way, in a way that doesn't take up a lot of stress, a lot of time. And we're just sitting back and, making 10%, 10%. And that really adds up to a lot of money.
That's a fantastic strategy, right? Yeah. Again, and using the Moneyball analogy, I'm glad that we see eye to eye there. I love that, right? And it's just a matter of you just put yourself in the position to win. That's what the military does. They put themselves in the best possible chance to succeed at a mission, right? Back in the World War II times, right, there was a lot different scenarios. But nowadays, even more, we go to a military operation, we expect to win. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's because they've put in those parameters and that framework to make sure that they'll win. And the same thing, it sounds like what you're teaching your students is, hey, give yourself the best chance to win. And then, hey, if something doesn't go well, that's okay. You got to figure out if you're going to cut your losses or you're going to stick it out. You can determine that, but just be at peace with your decision and don't let that be the thing that holds you back, right? Hey, I got rejected at the bar by the pretty girl. Doesn't mean I don't go ask another girl, right?
Right. Right. Okay. So what it seems like I'm hearing you saying is that in order to get in, right, to get to bat, you got to overcome that initial inertia. And you got to have a deeper meaning. And I think, and I tell a lot of people this, is they ask, and we ask them, and they're like, hey, why do you want to learn how to trade? And they're like, oh, I want to make more money. It's never about the money. There's always something deeper there. It's, I want to be more successful. I want to be respected. I want to take my family on vacations or whatnot. So that's the first step. And the second step, once you're in the game, once you're in the field and things are happening, you have your limits. You focus on what's in front of you. You don't worry about all the noise because in trading, there's noise every single day. There's, Trump sent out a tweet and this person is doing this and the stock is, this stock over here. And this guy said, this is going to happen. That guy said, that's going to happen. So there's tons of noise. So I like that. The left and the right limits, you focus only on what's in your field of vision. You don't worry about anything else. And you have your set trading plan, or in your terminology, I believe you called it, what was it? When you mentioned that before they go into battle, they have their...
Well, they just have their acceptable risk, right? Or
acceptable risk.
Their framework for what is so like I said, in that scenario I used, you might be in a small squad and you're going through a reconnaissance, right? You're going through this area. Oh, I see this as an area that we might do an ambush. And then they go and they see that the enemy element that they're looking at is twice the size of what they have. That's not an acceptable risk. You let them go by. Right? Same thing what you're talking about. Hey, I'm not taking huge risks. I'm taking more at-bats at smaller risks so that I can protect myself long-term, right? Which is a great framework to use.
Right.
And it's the same thing, right? Hey, left and right limits. Okay, so then I see the shiny object. Oh, this big stock might be something big, but it's in a different kind of market.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to determine, is that the kind of thing that's going to be useful to you? Is that helpful? Is that the kind of thing that's going to move you, is taking that kind of risk moving you towards your goal, or using the same strategy to build over time so that you have that protection that you're looking for, right? I would suggest, depending on what you're teaching your students or what their goals are, it's like, hey, don't go off at that big shiny object, right? Unless you've done the research and you know that you're going to give yourself the best chance to win.
Right.
Stick to what you've got there. Stay at what's your acceptable amount of risk.
Right. So it's not like
risk, great. Like, try it out. There's no, like, when one of my clients come to me and they said they want to go do something crazy, or they might think it's crazy to them, I'm like, hey, that's not crazy. Let's talk it out. Let's figure out how we can make it happen. We've got to figure out what's acceptable. Is this serving your purpose? Right. In the military writing concepts, right, it always starts with mission, right? Hey, this is the mission that we have. Here's our situation that we're in. Here's how we're going to execute that. Here's what we're going to do if something goes wrong, right? And it's all planned out. It's all structured in that way to, again, give them the best chance to win. Or if they're going to lose, they do it without losing a lot.
And then they have the right tools. That's
right.
also,
of course, you got to have the right tools and the resources and the training in order to go do those things. But
so what was?
Hey, what's the situation? Here's our mission. Let's go.
What was your position in the Army?
So I had a various positions. So I was an officer. So at the end of the day, most officers are leaders, right? They're more management style, more strategic thinking. So technically, I was trained as a logistics officer. And so it was really about maneuvering equipment, making sure people have what they needed. How do we move, X equipment to Y location? But I also held roles such as company command, where I was dealing with over 200 people with various types of departments and equipment and moving them to missions and goals here and there. When I was deployed, I was an executive officer for an intel and sustainment company. So basically dealing with all of the super secret squirrel intelligence equipment, making